idea what's going on from your end. I'm going to have just it takes all I have to orchestrate this event on my end. So I've got, um, hopefully I've got it all set up, and I really don't have any way for you to communicate with me. So there you go. So either we're going to be together for this awesome time today as we celebrate Pride Sunday, or nothing will be happening for the next 45 minutes. So let's just it goes well, shall we? I'm excited for today. Today is a day we celebrate and honor Pride Sunday. We have a number of festivals that we try to host throughout the year. And so today I brought some of the items from those festivals to kind of remind me of the way in which we connect to Earth Day, the way in which we connect to summer solstice, to, of course, our Pride Festival, to Dia de los Muertos, to All Souls Day, to Festival, Carnival Sunday. It's all there. So we try to do both, kind of traditional experiences throughout the year on our Sunday morning, but we also have time together to gather together and do these special events. And they mean a lot to me because they allow us a particular focus that is connected to all the energy in the culture in which we find ourselves, right? So we honor Pride alongside of all those who march in the Pride Parade every year as a congregation, and all the other events that happen here on site. I wanted to, as you get settled in, to make sure you're able to shout out to each other and say hello to each other. I'm going to try to navigate between watching you on Facebook and watching what's going on in a Zoom today. So make sure you shout out to each other and say hello, connect to each other, kind of build a sense of community today. And then I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing today and the various conversations that we're going to have today and next week as well. So do a shout out for each other, and let's see how that, where that takes you. And oh yeah, it looks like we're doing okay. Oh my gosh. Let me start off by talking a little bit about why I think I'm so proud to be part of a congregation and a faith community that has taken seriously an open heart to all of those within our community and in our shared collective together, right? The life that we share. That we have spent time honoring those, no matter how it manifests itself inside of every human being, this sense of sexual orientation or gender identity. And that we see that spirit or sacred or holy or God stirs within every aspect of our common life together, including the ways in which we come to understand how we are sexually oriented, or the way in which we emerge into our self-identity from a gender perspective. And that we have, as a congregation and as faithful people, we've had to work hard to figure out how to kind of broaden our understanding of all sorts of issues, but that one in particular. And so I don't remember how many years ago it's been now that we spent a lot of time discussing that and coming to the commitment as a congregation, anyway, this faith community, to be able to embrace sisters and brothers in an open way when it comes to those issues. So we celebrate that every year. We mark it, we pay attention to it, and we recommit our lives to that journey. And why is that journey so important? Well, I think, from just a general perspective, one of the vibrant pieces of any faith or spirituality or religious tradition is its capacity to be able to adapt to the evolving experience of life itself. Whether that evolution is an internal evolution of your own particular journey into life, whether that evolution is a cultural evolution around what's the culture experiencing and what are the changes that it's confronting in all sorts of ways. And even in the environment, as the environment shifts, how are we adapting? How does spirituality adapt alongside of the unfolding of life itself? both internal and external. And the best spiritualities, the best religious experience has that capacity for adaptation. It is not, as we sometimes allude to, a solid rock on which we stand and then we will not budge, right? That's not a dynamic faith. That's not a living faith. That's not in my sense, my experience anyway, a vibrant faith. That's sort of a fear-based faith. It has no porous capacity for the real experience of life. Rather, it has a rigidity that then becomes a vetting process for what's a part of this rock and what's not. And I don't think that's appropriate or healthy. Now, that's just my perspective, but I think that's the beauty of this community that I'm a part of, is that we've grown to the place where we have adaptability. We're able to allow for a growing or emerging experience of the way in which spirituality or faith is folded in to the unfolding of life itself. So around areas of sexual orientation or gender identity, around areas of racial justice, the environment, economic issues, politics, you can go on, right? Your spiritual life should have ability to be able to fully engage and fully help you engage. And even so, I mean, this capacity, of course, we know in our own personal lives when we face challenges or opportunities or medical emergencies or loss, how is my faith able to be a partner along that journey as well? It's all important stuff. And so today is a day to kind of celebrate the way that's worked along this particular theme. The other thing I'll say before I get started in our interview today, and I'm excited to interview Janet Katari today around this issue, but the other thing I wanted to just touch on today before I got into that interview is that I think one of the greatest capacities of spirituality and faith is just simply its ability to allow you what I would call maybe barrier dropping, right? That we are always kind of constructing a worldview, a self-perception, even little things, biases that we construct around us to help us kind of move through the world or to protect ourselves from world, whatever it happens to be. We build those all the time. And there is an invitation in the journey of faith and spirituality that's possible that is just simply a dropping of those barriers. I'll give you an example. For many people, being in nature is one of the most profound spiritual experiences. And I think part of it is that it happens in that moment when your own personal self or ego self, as you move into nature, begins to drop away, right? It's a barrier dropping, and you find yourself held in this beautiful, larger, graceful context, or just powerful context, whatever it happens to be. And that when that barrier drops down and you feel a deep connection with nature, that to me is that moment when you say, wow, that was a spiritual experience for me. And I think that's the case when it comes to living in relationship with each other as well. So I want you to think about those things as we begin this interview today and have this conversation today with Janet Katari. So let me bring her on to the conversation. Janet is a graduate from Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary and a mother of a family who's kind of been through the journey in their own family system of their children navigating their own journey into gender identity. And I think she'll bring some wisdom for families and individuals who are exploring that or experiencing that for themselves. So let me welcome her on stage today as we continue this Zoom conversation. Hello, Janet. Can you hear me okay? I think I've got you muted, so I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, that's perfect. It's awesome to have you, Janet. I'm so glad that you're obviously going to be part of this conversation today. I've been kind of setting it up, so I don't know if you were hanging around and watching how I was setting it up, but
Nope, I was in the waiting room and heard nothing of what you said. So.
Okay, you were stuck in there. That's great. So Janet, as I've talked to people, we wanted to have a conversation with you particularly. You had a child, Amelia, who kind of moved through her own understanding of her unfolding, or the way in which her own gender identity was sort of coming into fruition for her. And one of the themes we wanted to focus in on this particular Sunday is sort of how do parents and families enter into that journey in solidarity with their children or their family system. And I know it's probably filled with all sorts of twists and turns and complications, insights, the whole gamut. Whenever you're navigating new frontier in a family or as a parent, it's always full of that. And so I was hoping today that you would spend some time kind of thinking about sharing some of the particular aspects of that journey that you went through as a mom and as a family system that kind of might help people think about how they might do that, no matter how their children or their family system is kind of manifesting this journey into either sexual orientation or gender identity. And so let's just start off in general with just some thoughts from your process, maybe some insights you would share as you kind of reflect on that experience that took place in your family system.
Sure. I'll just mention a few things, and then we can go into some specific follow-ups. Amelia came out to me when she was in high school, and I think at one point when you and I were talking, Dan, we talked about like how I helped her, explore her gender identity or something like that. And I think that I was not really a helper in that process. She fully realized it on her own. And
so it's not like you noticed things and were trying to encourage exploration,
no.
or so she literally was taking that journey herself and kind of telling you, she was taking the lead in that. That's what I'm hearing.
That's right. So I was not the midwife, so to speak. She and I think I think everyone I think anyone in that process needs to come to it themselves. In Amelia's case, I don't think I ever would have guessed ahead of time, given her kind of general persona. And I think that's based on my own very fixed gender norms, which I never would have thought that I had. I never would have thought that I would say, oh, well, a kid who acts like a girl and identifies as a girl, like even saying acts like a girl is putting someone in a pigeonhole, right?
Right.
Because it's saying that's kind of who someone was, but based on my own understandings and kind of belief system, I never would have guessed that. But once Amelia came out to me, it was complicated, right? Because I think in my mind, it's kind of a binary decision, or not decision, but it's a binary happening, right? And so at one point, there's, but going through a transition is a transition process. And it's also a very, there's a staging to coming out and who you tell and when. And people respond in very different ways. Amelia was really fortunate to have a very supportive friend group and a very supportive school, who even, reached out to me. One of the stories was they reached out to me on her behalf because she wanted to change her name at school. And they said, Amelia is going to change her name. And we're wondering if you need any support about that. So,
I mean, I know you wouldn't say you were just along for the ride on this thing, but it really does feel like she, to her credit, the ability to be able to do the internal work to take those steps like she did is pretty phenomenal, I would think.
I think so too. I'm really proud of her.
Let me ask, do you think the openness, there had to be, like you said, her friendship group provided support, her school was very supportive. There had to be in the household some level of capacity for absorbing this that had been nurtured over time, that she felt safe, you know, moving into with you. Don't you think that was, do you think that was part of why she felt so self-empowered?
I mean, gosh, it'd be easy to say that now, right?
Okay.
Oh yeah, it's because
I set
of
up such a
what,
nurturing environment.
yes. And you know, I hope that's true.
Mhm.
But I think it's also true that kids all over in all kinds of situations understand about themselves that they are transgender and they can't help but come out. And
Mm.
sometimes that results in, a lot of times, right, the homeless population of transgender youth is very high.
Very
And
sad, yeah.
it's it's because people get kicked out of their houses or don't feel safe in their homes or aren't allowed to be who they are. So while I like to think that we were very supportive, and I think that I did everything that I personally could, right, to support her journey, to
Yeah.
help her when she was choosing to come out to people for whom it was harder to do that. Um, Helping her with other, you know, all the kinds of things she has to navigate
Yeah.
in terms of making that transition. Um, you know, I think she would have done it anyway. It's just a much better journey for her to not have to do it by herself, right? Without
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
family. So
And so I did want to explore a couple of like maybe key milestones along this process for you, but how did you kind of, what was the internal work you were doing to be as supportive as she was starting to take this journey, you know, and you had to advocate for her or help provide maybe some guidance when she would come to you and talk about, you know, I'm going to talk about this with this group and that's going to be a harder conversation. How did you look for resources, or what did you do along the way, you think, to help you better partner with her through those difficult kind of conversations or experiences that you know she was going to have?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think first I had to acknowledge the very complicated emotions that I was feeling, right?
Mm.
So in
Yeah,
addition
can you
to
talk
that,
about that a little bit? I mean,
yeah,
was
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, so in addition to the, you know, the great love and pride that I had for her, you
Mhm.
know, there was also some grief around the, you know, all these deeply held ideas and expectations that I mentioned earlier. You know, those shifted,
Yeah.
and they also shifted for the same kinds of reasons, right? But all of a sudden, it's kind of a loss of one child and the gain of another child, even though there's the same person and the same
Right.
qualities and all that. You know, there was some grief definitely involved, um, and uh, I mean, I think that was I once I could acknowledge that that was true, that I, you know, at the beginning I was like, okay, I'm going to support you no matter what. I'm going to
Right.
help you, whatever you need,
Yeah.
and you know, at some point I had to say, you know what, there's stuff going on,
Yeah.
so
Right. Right.
uh, you know, so I needed to I wouldn't say deal with that, but I needed to acknowledge that that was going on. I think that's
Yeah.
one. And then in terms of resources, there's an organization here in the Bay Area called Gender Spectrum, and they have in the past had conferences in person at St. Mary's College
Mm.
Over the summer, and so I was able to go to that conference. And there's a lot of people of all ages who are transgender, a lot of discussion of everything you can imagine.
Mm.
How do you do all the legal paperwork? What's involved in working with schools? What are your rights? What are not your rights?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what's not protected? Um, but also kind of, you know, emotional, uh, emotional pieces, coming out, some interesting, like for me, one of the interesting things that came out is that there are a significant number of people who are transgender who don't identify as transgender or don't want to be known as transgender because they are women or men, and they don't want to have that label, right, of being transgender or be a part of that community. So it's kind of a different type of community in the whole LGBTQIA spectrum. Right. It's because there isn't a sense of everyone wanting to name that that's a part of who they are.
Yeah, that is interesting. So it's a little bit more, I mean, those other transitions are complex, but it sounds like there's more nuancing. So maybe there's not as much of a, do you think there's like, not everybody's having the same kind of experience in the way in which they give expression to that self-understanding. And so there's not as much kind of rigorous solidarity. Maybe you're a little bit more like, how do I navigate this for myself kind of thing going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a negative word to say passing, but that's kind of, so, but people who are unhappy about it, I guess, might use that word, but it's, so that was interesting to me because this was something I had never thought about, that there were young kids there who are transgender, and at that time Amelia was maybe 16 or 17, and that was a new experience for me to see young kids who were transgender. And since then I've met, just through personal connections, transgender kids and parents of transgender kids, and talked with them about it. And it's just kind of the importance of, for me, the importance of supporting Amelia where she is and what she wants to be doing. And there's some hiccups along the way. I think once she came out to me, it seemed important that then other people in the family know, right? It seemed important to me that once I knew, and once Amelia was kind of starting to look like she might be transitioning, that she come out to more people.
Yeah.
And I think that was an example of kind of my thinking that I knew what was best, when in case, in fact, it's up to Amelia around who she's going to come out for. And if there's I can say, here's what the consequence might be.
Yeah.
People are going to know what's happening before you tell them. But
that is interesting. I think it sounds like a challenging parental internal conversation you're going to have about how much do you drive that bus, given your expectations and your history and your wisdom, and how much do you kind of really honor your child's ability to drive that bus. I hadn't thought about the complexities of trying to navigate those waters.
And I think, and I think there's every family probably has different boundaries, and especially because Amelia was fairly old, right? She was approaching adulthood. It felt important to me to have that kind of trying to figure out as much as I could from my not being trans, but being able to do research and then sharing that with her and talking with her about it.
That's great. Let's shift gears a little bit. You're also a graduate from Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, so congratulations.
Thank you.
I remember when you started that journey so long ago. If you think about what you've experienced as a family and kind of the exposure you've had to this at this level, and kind of the role of either congregational dynamics or even maybe the way in which you might see this influencing the way you think about theological concepts, or what's the place of Christianity or spirituality in our time. Did this experience kind of inform that understanding as well? You talked about sort of some of the changes you had to go through in your own expectations for children. Maybe has it had effect on your expectations for your sense of what the role of church is or spirituality in our time. Can you have any reflections on that at this stage in the game?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if this particular, I mean, it's hard to say, but I don't know if this particular experience shifted, but I had a lot of experiences through seminary, in terms of trans people. There are trans people in seminary, and there's trans people who are pastors, and I think, I think maybe before Amelia came out, that might have seemed kind of unique, like that really stood out. So when I would remember something about a person, that would be the number one thing, that they were trans.
Interesting.
And I think that's something that sometimes in a church that's maybe not so functional, that can happen, right? You think not just about trans people, but about people in general.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, that's the one who's complaining about this, and that's the one who's having this problem.
That's interesting.
And that's the one who has the great voice, right? You've got the one thing.
Right.
And I think that, my experience with Amelia, but also experience with other people, and has helped me just see everyone as more complete people. So, there's a lot of aspects of people, a lot of parts of people's personality, things that we don't know about determine who they are and how they act.
Yeah.
And someone being trans doesn't mean that they are a certain way or a certain anything, but just they're trans. So
yeah, I love that. I'm a somewhat of a fan of Carl Jung, although I'm not, a Jungian psychotherapist. Maybe I should have been one, but Jung thinks about salvation as really the invitation into wholeness, and not, sort of my ability to get saved from all my problems, like pulled out of my problems, but rather this idea of being able to be whole. And I hear you describing what the transition you went to is to see someone for their wholeness and not just for their unique, kind of niche articulation of some aspect of their personality. So they're allowed to be fully themselves. And maybe that in and of itself is kind of an invitation to, what it means to be human, right? To be your full self. I like that. I have to think about that one. That's a good one. What, as you think about going forward together as a family or as a mom, is there anything as you now project forward that you think, you're sort of anticipating or thinking about? Obviously Amelia is, I don't remember how old you said she is now, but she's moving into adulthood. So it might not be as intense if someone had a younger child transitioning, but any thoughts on kind of how you think about preparing for what's ahead?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, things are hard for people who are transgender, and things are amazing, right? There are so many good things now, but there are some challenging aspects of being transgender, especially being targets of violence, and maybe sometimes harsh words, which can also be very painful. And so that's the kind of thing I worry about. So I guess that's another emotion that comes up in addition to some grief is a lot of fear. And so I think, for me and for Amelia and for all of us in the family, part of it is managing that fear to allow Amelia to have just the types of experiences that everyone has, and understanding where it's safe to do that and where it's not. And, she's in college, and her college seems to be a great environment. But, if she were to go to, I don't know, parts of Indiana or
Right.
even parts of California,
Yeah, exactly.
It would be harder.
Mhm.
So I think that's part of it. And then, you know, she is going through all the normal things that people go through when they're shifting, right? So
Mhm.
she's 22, I think. Hopefully that's right.
I love
She's,
that because I don't know how old my kids are either. So I'm so happy I met somebody else who would have the same problem.
let me see
So
that. No,
she's
she's 20,
22-ish.
she's
Yeah.
21.
All
She's
right.
21. She'll be 22 this year,
All
but
right.
she's 21. And, so she's definitely moving from
Mhm.
childhood into young adulthood, squarely in young adulthood.
Yeah.
And then she'll be launching in her own space. So,
Yeah.
thinking about all of the things, both emotionally and strategically, right, that she
Yeah.
needs to be
Yeah.
ready for, in terms of, when she's going to need to get her first apartment. What's
Mhm.
that going to be like?
Mhm.
Or, just, I think it's a lot of the normal things that one does as a young adult that, there's a little bit more of a barrier when you're a
Yeah.
part of any group that
Yeah.
is discriminated against.
Yeah.
And so she faces that.
I mean, I like the way and this is good for families to pay attention to, right? So to not just get in your head, I've got to manage all the logistics that are around this, because I didn't think about the waves of logistics like you learned at St. Mary's College. So there's all that kind of stuff. But then there is also this sort of psycho-emotional landscape or journey that you have to tend to that runs alongside of it too. And I think you've really lifted up this kind of, for you anyway, you've realized that you do need to acknowledge and work both of those and to pay attention to those and how they're unfolding in your personal life and in your family life. Um, yeah, I appreciate the way in which you gave some shape to that in this conversation. What's just to close out? What's one, if you think back now? I don't want you to think in terms of, oh, I got to come up with some wise wisdom for parents or families who might, be on the early stage, kind of early phases of a transition with their children. But thinking back, do you have any? I've asked you to go forward thinking, but now thinking back, any thoughts in retrospect that you might um, kind of allow families to think about as they get ready for their own children moving through that transition, when they start thinking about their own sexual orientation or gender identity, whatever that ends up manifesting itself
Mm-hmm.
as?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a magic bullet, or
Yeah.
nor do I have a specific instant that I can think of that I would want to do differently or repeat. But just kind of generally, I would say, what we were talking about earlier in terms of really trying to understand who your kid is, and that really the best way of understanding
Mm.
that is listening to what they say to you.
Mm.
So, developing the developing the type of relationship, or having the kinds of conversations that can, um, allow for that surfacing without judgment on the part of the parent. Um, there's a time to have that judgment, right? Or to
Right.
have the discussion about this, this is not right. But initially, it's just making them comfortable coming and talking to you. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do like that. Again, it goes back to the sort of how do you attune yourself to your child's evolution in a way that allows them to be most holistic, right? I don't think about that obviously for my kids anymore. Maybe I should have when they were growing up, but I was, when you were talking, I was thinking about my grandkids, right? Like, how do I really
Mhm.
listen to my grandkids so that they feel as if they're giving full-throated voice to who they're becoming along the journey, and they're not trying to just accommodate my niche perspective of them, is what I'm hearing you say. So I probably cast these, and we all do this for everybody. We sort of cast these expectations based on our own way in which we have analyzed who someone is, rather than allowing them the capacity, the generative capacity to really express self.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dan. Even when you often elementary school teachers might send home a form, how would you describe your child?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Like the things you choose to describe your child in that are what the teacher is going to find, right?
Right. It creates a box, right? Of,
yes,
here, put my kid in this pigeonhole. This is the one I want
right,
for my kid.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. That's interesting. No, that's really thoughtful stuff. And I opened up today. I know you didn't listen to it, but I opened up today about how I think one aspect of really being a deeply spiritual person, a religious person, is really this capacity to kind of be able to kind of drop these kind of the barriers that we build up, either kind of the constructs we build up around other people, around relationships, around our sense of self. And when those things tend to fall away a little bit, we begin to see more clearly who the other is, or who I am, and I heard a little bit of that in your conversation as well. This idea we all have expectations, that we project onto our kids or ourselves or our community, blah blah blah. And there is an okay. It's like we do have permission to allow those to soften and just hear almost like the story of life being spoken through our vulnerability to the changing world in which we find ourselves, or the experience of our changing kids or our changing vocations. That's okay to live in that kind of relationship with those, rather than this sort of rigid construct that we oftentimes find that is more safe or more comforting. Anyway, I'm getting too abstract and obtuse, which I often do in these interviews. So I'm going to stop
Well,
that.
yeah, I'm just going to comment on that though too,
Yeah.
Dan, is that the other thing about kids as they're exploring, and I mean adults too, but
Yeah.
especially kids in this context, as they're exploring things about themselves, is they're going to try things on sometimes, and those might not be. But if you're too rigid,
right,
that might not be their final answer.
Yeah, that's
And
a good
then
point too.
So you just have to kind of keep listening and be open and try to see how they're acting in the whole story of their life. So
yeah, I like that. That's a nice kind of final way to think about this, is let them explore and experiment a little bit. Yeah. A lot to reflect on, Janet. I totally appreciate you pausing for a moment and taking some time out of your morning to talk with us. And then, of course, I know you're coming down to the church to do the drive-in service at 11. So
that's right.
how are we doing? Yeah, well, you're going to be fine. So
Yeah.
I'll give you some time to do that. So I'm going to shut this down at this point, Janet, just with a deep appreciation for, as we mark Pride Sunday as a kind of a community of faith every year, we just try to allow people to come and tell their story about how they have either experienced or kind of what they've learned along this long journey of sexual orientation and gender identity. And so this year, focusing in on families and the way in which parents might navigate that frontier. It's just been great to have a conversation with you today. So lovely having you with us.
Great to be here, Dan. Thanks.
All right.
I'll see you in a few minutes.
I'll see you. Yeah, see you at 11. All right.
Okay. Bye.
Well, great to have Janet with us today. Hopefully you found that conversation meaningful. I know that I would encourage you, no matter where you are on the spectrum of parenting, like I'm now a grandparent. That's the most of my parenting, if you're going to have any, is with being grandparent. Or maybe it's great grandparent, or maybe it is parent, or maybe it's, if you're listening to this and you're a child moving through this, just to know that we all play a deep and important role in the conversations that do create, our capacity to truly be who we are. And so however you kind of listen to this conversation, I would just invite you to kind of think about that. What is the best self I can bring to my relationship to anyone who's kind of exploring or experimenting or moving in or out of their sense of their own identity, whether it be sexual or gender identity. and even racial identity. You know what? How am I really there for other people? Maybe is a question, and that I'm not imposing my preconceived notions on everybody, but I'm allowing for a real robust conversation to be the guiding force in that relationship rather than my own perspective. Anyway, just some things to think about for today as we celebrate Pride. I'm going to give you some time to kind of reflect on this with a piece of music that that Martin Morley put together for today. And I'm hoping that I can pull this off, to integrate this piece of music into our time together, just to give you a moment to kind of pause and reflect. And it's a beautiful piece. I love this piece because it's called "You Are My All in All." And while you don't hear the lyrics, just that title, "You Are My All in All," and to think about that idea of Jungian wholeness. How do we really allow ourselves and each other to be all in all, not all that we can be, but fully ourselves together? So enjoy this piece of music as I share with you Martin's gift of music today.
Composer Dennis Jernigan was born in Oklahoma in 1959, and he composes in the contemporary Christian style. In interviews, he has described himself not as a song writer, but as a song receiver. His most popular tune was written in 1990. This is "You Are My All in All."
All right, nuts. My apologies. I don't think I got that to work. I think I cannot. So just skip over all that. Hold on a minute. All right, so I give myself credit. Number one, I was knocking it out of the park with the interview, but I cannot integrate music into this time together. I completely apologize. I'll try to post up Martin's piece, "You Are My All in All," to the YouTube channel when we're done. It's frankly embarrassing that I can't pull that off, particularly given the capacity of technology today. And yet I've got so many cords plugged into my laptop, that one didn't seem to figure out, where to draw the signal from. So let me just wrap up today, and then obviously encourage you as you think about this particular focus for today on Pride Sunday, how you will kind of allow the way in which spirit or soul manifests for you in the world, your religious experience, if you want to call it that, and to allow it to sort of partner with you in the deepest conversations and relationships and expectations and hopes and longings that we have for each other. And to Janet's point, to not think about, well, who am I going to accept as another category for me to pigeonhole into my experience with others? But how can I really open my heart and my soul and my life experience to trust that I can hear like God's voice or spirit voice or the voice of the evolving collective that we share, whatever that voice is, inside of the evolving experience of another person, right? How can I attune myself to hearing something holy in every interaction or conversation with another. And I think that's the expectation I would encourage you to think about bringing to conversations with people, no matter what they're going through, but particularly today as we focus in on sexual orientation or gender identity, how I approach those conversations, that does matter. It matters for the way in which I orient to the world, and it matters to other people as they are trying to orient to the world. And particularly to those whose voices oftentimes get smothered in the way in which we kind of create this social construct that we find ourselves in, right? I was thinking the other day about, probably the most important voices for us to attune to are those that are pushed to the margins or even oppressed. Clearly, we've come to grips with that, or started to come to grips with that in the Black Lives Matter movement. These are voices that we just have not allowed to find expression in our time. But you can go back in history, women's voices, the voices we've talked about today. I would even go as far as to say the voice of the tree and the river, the voice of bird and animals. These are voices that we sometimes just don't allow into a vibrant conversation and to where they are finding place in our view of the world, or our sense of what does it mean to truly be whole together. That's kind of what I'm thinking about today. And because what I'm thinking about is what you get to think about for a little while. That's what I would encourage you to reflect on for today. So thank you for being part of, obviously, this Pride Sunday, the interview, obviously, that we had with Janet. And then, of course, I'll post Martin's music for you to follow up with as well. So let's, a couple of announcements today before we get going. One, I'm going to invite one of our high school students to join me for this conversation. Kira is going to tell you a little bit about a project that's coming up early in February. So let me invite her to be a part of our announcement time today before I get to the other announcements. Kira, are you there? Hello, Kira. Well, let me start talking to Kira. I asked Kira to jump in on the screen with me, so hopefully she'll jump on board. I think I've got her. Yeah, she's just not live yet. A couple reminders, there's no confirmation today. So a reminder that there's no confirmation today. So if you're in the confirmation program, that's not happening today. We do have Kira on. So Kira, once you unmute yourself, I'm going to have you. Are you unmuted? I can't hear you for some reason, but that doesn't mean they can't hear you. Hold on a minute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Hello, Kira. Kira is one of our high school students, and they've got a project planned for next month. Kira, you want to tell us a little bit about it? Okay. Do you hear me all right? Kira, once you hear me, then you can.
Oh, yeah. Wait, now I can hear you.
All right. Now I can hear
sorry.
you. So you're on. So tell us a little bit about what the high schoolers have in mind for early next month, a little bit about the project and what you're hoping people will do when they show up.
So next week, we're going to have a paint Zoom. So it's going to take place on the 6th.
That's
at
Saturday,
12.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to just have acrylic paint supplies at home. And we'll do a tutorial. I don't know specifically what we're doing, to be honest, but it should be really fun and all ages are welcome.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're basically doing a paint party on Zoom. When you say it's going to be, there's somebody helping you figure out how to paint, or when you said it's is there somebody kind of guiding you through the process? Is that what you're thinking is going to happen?
Yeah, pretty much.
Did you just hire a painter in the local community, or is it somebody who's an artist?
No.
Do you have any idea?
I don't think so. Yeah, I was gonna paint.
That's great. Well, Kira will be there, and a lot of our high schoolers will be there. Assuming our Cheryl will be there too, who helps coordinate all of our high school activities. I'll try to be there. So get out your paints next Saturday at noon, right, Kira?
Yeah.
Next Saturday at noon. And then, especially if you got kids, let's get around the kitchen table and hang out together and see what comes of it. All right, Kira. Well, thanks for coming on board and making the announcement this morning.
Bye.
All right, see ya. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Next Sunday, when we get together, another interview. Excited that we are welcoming Sam LaRue as a part of our contextual ministry and context student from Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary. So she'll come on next Sunday and have a conversation with me. I'm really looking forward to that. Also, since it's Black History Month, that's starting up this month in February, we've got a group that did a lot of work around racial justice. It was a racial justice activation circle. And I think I'm going to ask each of them to contribute a little something each week. What was an important learning that they had, and maybe a resource that they had that they can share with you as we all honor Black History Month this month, particularly given what the culture is going through. I think it's important for us to kind of gain a greater awareness of that full story. So we'll do that throughout the month. So watch for those in your email. Also, coming soon on the 11th of February at 11 a.m., we've got our new study called, I think it's called Life Before God or something like that. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's a way to think about how do we center ourselves in our relationship with the sacred or God, and then learning from the way in which Jesus did that through his prayer practices that we see articulated in some of the gospel writers. And so it's kind of a look at the historical Jesus, the way in which Jesus engaged in this idea of prayer in his time, and then how does that affect or impact the way in which we think about how we sit in the presence of the unknown or the sacred today. So that study's coming up starting on the 11th. And then one more item, we have a new podcast series starting up next Friday called Braving Confinement. So it's a 4-part series about thinking through the ways in which we're all sort of in lockdown mode together, but are there things that we can learn along the way? So that the graduate student will be covering that topic for 4 different episodes. That all starts next Friday. So tune in for a new series on Soul Forum that gets launched then. And then finally, if you're interested in your Sunday breakout, we're on today at 4 o'clock. We'll probably talk a little bit about how we navigate sort of our, the way in which each of us kind of lives into the realities of sexual orientation or gender identity, what we've learned along the way as we've explored that as a congregation and kind of wrestled with or been excited to explore new things and experience new things in that journey. We'll probably have a little bit of that conversation today at 4, but it's also just a great way to get to say hi to other folks, kind of a social time together. We'll post that link at the top of the Facebook feed and send out an email about that as well. All right, so that's it for today. Thanks for being with us, and look forward to meeting you again here next Sunday at 9:30 and our interview with Sam. All right, be well.